What's going on, everybody? It's Warren. Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder, and if I told you that Black Widow could still be alive even after Avengers Infinity War, would you believe me? Better yet, would you believe Marvel Studios? Because that is essentially what they are kind of telling us. There was an alternate post-credit scene for Black Widow that obviously did not make the cut, but this post-credit scene points to Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, possibly still being alive. Now, of course, we'll never see this post-credit scene, unfortunately, because it didn't make it to the final cut, but luckily for us, director Kate Shortland of the Black Widow film recently opened up to Variety and told us what this post-credit scene was actually going to be. And needless to say, if you have not seen Black Widow or its post-credit scene and you are trying to avoid spoilers, you should probably click away now. But if you've seen it or you simply don't care about spoilers and want to know what's going on, we'll be talking about the post-credit scene and how Black Widow could very well still be alive in the MCU right now and eventually make a return. And of course, if you love Marvel and want to stay up to date on all things relating to the MCU, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. So during the Black Widow film, we are introduced to Yelena Belova, who is the sister of Natasha Romanoff. Not a blood-related sister, but as Dom would say from the Fast and the Furious franchise, she's family.
I don't have friends, I got family.
But throughout random parts of the movie, they would whistle to each other. One would whistle and the other would whistle back. Fast forward to the post-credit scene of the Black Widow movie. We didn't get a scene of an actual funeral for Natasha, but we did get her sister Yelena visiting her grave. She goes to her tombstone, starts to kind of clean things up around it, and then she whistles that same whistle she did to her sister throughout the movie, and of course, nobody whistles back, although a lot of us were sitting there waiting for that whistle back. Instead, Valentina Allegra de Fontaine comes out, interrupts the nice moment that she was having, and then lies to her and tells her that Hawkeye killed her sister. That's the post-credit scene we got, but a post-credit scene that we almost got instead would have been of Yelena visiting the grave, whistling, and then getting a response, a whistle back. This is what director Kate Shortland told Variety they almost put into Black Widow. She said, "We never put it in, but we talked about it." Now, this is incredible news because if this post-credit scene would have actually made it in the movie, that would have heavily implied that Natasha was still alive. Because who else would be whistling back? It wouldn't be anybody else, it would just be Natasha. And we all were waiting for it. We thought it was going to happen. But the fact that this alternate post-credit scene almost made it into the movie means that to Marvel, Black Widow can indeed return. If Black Widow was 100% dead, they couldn't even talk about this alternate post-credit scene. And since they talked about it, that means they're open to it. And if we think about the logic of the MCU during the Infinity Saga concerning the Infinity Stones, particularly the Soul Stone, Natasha could actually be alive. Now, first and foremost, before we talk about how exactly she's still alive, I know Scarlett has said that she's done, but we know how Marvel and the actors can be. They say pretty much whatever they need to say to keep everybody in the dark. Paul Rudd says that he's not Ant-Man, and then he's Ant-Man. They tell us it's not Avengers Endgame, the title of Avengers 4, and then of course it is Avengers Endgame. And the fact of the matter is, Natasha could very well still be alive, and I'll explain how. There's actually a very perfectly logical explanation to this that actually makes a lot of sense. And it goes back to the Soul Stone theory. To retrieve the Soul Stone, you have to sacrifice a soul. A soul for a soul, as Red Skull explains. But it was never really clarified what happens when you put it back. If the rule is a soul for a soul and you put it back, doesn't that mean you are putting a soul back and should receive one in return? And if so, and that is the rule, that would mean that Natasha would come back. But ultimately, that part might not actually matter, because Steve Rogers went back in time at the end of Avengers Endgame and he returned the stones right when they were taken. And if he did that correctly, then the soul should never be taken and Black Widow should return in the main timeline. But the rule of a soul for a soul is the law that Marvel established. And again, it works both ways. If you give the soul stone back, you should receive a soul in return. And since Black Widow's soul was the one given up, that's the one that should come back. If we tie this logic into the fact that we almost got a post-credit scene that heavily hints at Black Widow still being alive, this could very well explain how that could be. Now, ultimately, we didn't get the post-credit scene where Natasha would be whistling back. And that's because Marvel has a lot of stuff going on right now, and they needed this post-credit scene to set up the Thunderbolts, or the Dark Avengers. We're unsure at this point in time what this new team is going to be, but they're going to be a combination of the Thunderbolts and the Dark Avengers, and they're not going to be the greatest team. They're going to be a team of misfits and villains, really. And you have to keep in mind that Black Widow was actually supposed to be the very first film or project entirely for Marvel's Phase 4. Unfortunately, due to COVID, Black Widow got pushed back over a year, so other projects came out first, and we got the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which introduced Valentina and her recruiting US agent John Walker for this team. So we have to think big picture here. And the Black Widow post-credit scene was supposed to set up a future MCU project. It's supposed to tease the future of the MCU. But the big picture is actually kind of twofold, especially when it's concerning Black Widow. One, yes, the Black Widow post-credit scene did have to set up this new team that Valentina is recruiting. And again, Kevin Feige has confirmed that she is indeed recruiting. But two, we all just saw what happened in Loki. After the Loki season finale, anything is possible now. Like really, anything. Nothing is off the table. With the multiverse and infinite different realities, infinite different timelines, anything can happen. Which is actually the really big picture. Avengers Secret Wars. I've been talking about Secret Wars before Loki came out. I've really been talking about Secret Wars even before Avengers Endgame came out. People were wondering, well, what's next after Avengers Endgame? How could you even top that? And I stated, well, Secret Wars, that's going to be next. That's going to definitely top Avengers Endgame. A storyline in which multiple different versions of the same character come together with other superheroes and their multiple versions of themselves, or variants as we've learned, and then go on to team up and take on the villains, who of course have multiple different variants of them fighting together as well. This is going to be absolutely insane. We already saw how insane Loki got. Then of course Spider-Man No Way Home is going to be insane, but the big thing is, again, nothing's off the table. Black Widow could easily return. Not only could she be alive in our timeline, we could see other versions of herself coming thanks to the multiverse. And yes, Scarlett Johansson says she's done, but then you get a movie as big as Secret Wars that everybody is going to talk about for years and years and years. Well, that's kind of enough to bring somebody back. You'll want to be a part of that. So Black Widow could really return in two different ways. One, based off of everything that I've said in this video, she really could still be alive. The logic of the Soul Stone, a soul for a soul rule, makes sense. Since we returned the Soul Stone, the soul should be returned. Therefore, Black Widow should be alive. But if this is not the case, which kind of seems like it is thanks to the whole alternate post-credit scene that almost existed, but if it's not the case, Black Widow could always return in Secret Wars. She could always return in Multiverse of Madness, really at any point, because the multiverse exists now. It's a very real thing. But would you want her to return? Would you like her to still be alive in our timeline, or would you like to see an alternate version of her in some type of multiverse film? Regardless, let me know what you think about this theory in the comments down below. Do you think Black Widow could be alive? Let me know, and don't forget to like the video, and for live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.